The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
Welcome to Let Yourself Bloom, the podcast where motherhood and ambition coexist beautifully. I'm your host, Jenbanks, and in each episode, we'll dive deep into the journey of being more than a mom. Here, we believe that you can love your children deeply and still have room to nurture your own dreams. Picture this, a life where you don't have to choose between career and family, where you can be inspired by stories of women who have boldly stepped into their dual roles. Together, we'll explore how to balance, grow, and thrive in every season of life. Our guests will share their personal stories of finding identity beyond motherhood, proving that you can hold both your family and your ambitions in your heart. We'll talk about the seasons of life, embracing our unique paths, and giving ourselves permission to bloom whenever we're ready. Whether you're a working mom of two or dreaming of a bigger family, whether you're a stay-at-home mom seeking more or a career-driven woman balancing the chaos, this podcast is for you. Listen in and let the stories, advice, and community support you in becoming the fullest version of yourself. Tune in, be inspired, and remember, you are worthy of the same love and care you give to others. Welcome to Let Yourself Bloom. Let's grow together. Hello, I am here today with Jaycee. Welcome.
Hi, good to be with you, Jen.
Good to have you. I will introduce her and then she's just going to share her story that was just so impactful for me, and I know it's going to be impactful for you as well. So Jaycee is a senior at Brigham Young University. She currently works as a leadership coach with plans to get a master's degree in micro-organizational behavior. Jaycee is an avid reader of fantasy and Regency romance, loves making pasta with her husband, and dreams of adopting a kitten or two. She has shared today's story in a BYU Story Slam at the She Can, I Can Utah Valley Women's Conference and in an award-winning essay. Welcome, Jaycee. I am so excited for you to share your story.
Thank you so much. Am I good to go ahead?
Mm-hmm.
It was a month after my 14th birthday, and I decided that I was mature. Maybe you know or are a mature 14-year-old, but it might have been overly ambitious to claim that title for myself when I was still pouting about doing dishes every day. Luckily, I only had to be mature enough. Once you make that choice that you're mature enough, in my church, there's a tradition that you can receive a special blessing. Before I continue, I recognize that many listeners may have different beliefs about God or none at all, and I hope that you know that I respect that. This is a story about my decisions and not about my church. I'll be talking about God as if he were a character in my story because, for me, he was. For one, I felt that he was the one giving me the blessing. I had heard from friends and leaders about how their blessings told them all about their talents and gifts, and sometimes even a mission they had felt that God had called them to do. I wanted to know what he saw in me. I wound up in a comfy living room, sitting on a green leather couch, squashed in between my mom and my dad. The guy who was going to give me the blessing and his wife sat across from me, and he chatted with me before the blessing started. He asked, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I gave him a few answers, maybe an actor or a scientist, and he said, "Oh, that's great. When you get to college, and make sure to choose a major that will help you to have some good career options." I was so ecstatic. There was a special plan, an impact on the world that only I could make, and I would have a career. Then that church leader said, "Because you'll need to have a backup plan in case your husband dies." I looked around at all the adults nodding along, and my dreams shrunk back down. Ever since I was 11 years old, I have always wanted to have a career. But all the women I knew were stay-at-home moms, real and down to earth, with their shirt stained from making dinner. I saw career women as statues, inspiring but unattainable images rather than living and loving human beings. If I had a career, how could I live up to the warmth and faith of the women in my life? I was expected to be a mom, but I wasn't expected to have a career. But I wanted to have a career, and I didn't know if I wanted to be a mom. The tensions taffy pulled me, but it seemed pretty black and white. If I wanted to live up to expectations, the only path I had was to be a stay-at-home mom. So I arrived at college with no idea what to do there. I knew I should get a good education, though, so on the first day of school, I found myself on the marble stairs of the honors building. I hiked up to the lecture hall, and gasping for breath, I walked in. The room seemed huge and intimidating to me, with its high balcony overhead and a wainscot ceiling. I slid into the second row, and I see these two middle-aged women sitting in front of me. I'm thinking, what are these ladies doing in my class? Then the clock ticked to 9:30, and one of them got up. She was my biology professor. She pulled up a slide to introduce herself, and this slide had all her credentials on one side and a photo of her kids on the other side. As I got to know this professor better, I realized that she was a woman of faith, had a family, and had a career. In my black and white world, this professor was a splash of color. Still, I couldn't feel that I was allowed to have a career. After all, I never really stopped hearing phrases like, "You'll have a hard time raising kids with that major," or "How will you manage your work-life balance with a career?" or "That major will make you a great mom," or "Women are meant to be nurturers." For the next 2 years, I hopped from major to major to major, desperately trying to find the place where I could feel that God was finally telling me you belonged. I wanted to think that I was meant to do something amazing. But when I didn't get an answer about a major, it felt like God was saying, "I don't care what you major in, it doesn't matter anyway. When are you going to have some kids?" Fine. I decided if I was going to have a career, I would have to figure it out myself. It was a beautiful day outside when I arrived at my college's office of prestigious scholarships. But I didn't really notice. I had been delaying this appointment for 2 years. I was ushered into a small, intimate room with a woman I had never met. She smiled kindly as she explained all the grand scholarships I could work toward for grad school. I kept my legs crossed and a polite smile frozen on my face. Then she paused to ask if I had any questions. I did have questions, but in my mind, I heard that leader's voice saying, "You're a backup plan." And they all got stuck in my throat. But then I looked up. I saw this woman's degree on the wall, and I saw her family photo just beneath it. And I realized if I didn't ask now, I might never have courage again. Am I allowed to do this? I asked. To my horror, my throat seized up and my hands started shaking, so I quickly elaborated. "I know I'm supposed to be a mom. Can I go to grad school without disappointing God?" The advisor got this look on her face, as if she'd been exactly in my shoes. She offered me her hands and said, "There are as many ways to be a faithful woman as there are women in our church." As I stepped out of the advisor's office, the afternoon sunlight streamed over my face and into my soul. And for one of the first times, I felt like God was walking on that sidewalk with me. It turns out that not everyone is rolling their eyes at my education and waiting for me to pop out some kids. My career isn't a backup plan, it is the plan. These days, I see my mom with the same old shirt stains from dinner, and she tells me about the college courses she's taking now. And I tell her about my professors and my grades and my dreams and my plans. I'm 25 now. It's been a long decade since I was 14. I've grown up, I've made a few decisions, and I think I finally know what it means to mature. Thank you.
Just as brilliant as when I heard it the first time. I was at that conference, the She Can, I Can event, which they're having again in October. And I just remember getting chills and feeling the truth in that story, because you can be a mom and most of the guests that I have, that's what we talk about, being a mom and you don't have kids yet, right?
That's correct.
And so you're bringing that mindset into motherhood if and when you have children. And that's kind of what I did when I had my oldest. I saw these women lose their identity or become empty nesters and not know what to do. And so I made a decision and a promise to myself that I wouldn't lose my identity. And so here you are doing the same thing. And I love that so much. And you are actually the reason that I decided to have this Bloom Story segment, because there's so many of us that have a story, that have these moments of transformation or realization. And the more we can share them with others, the more freeing it is, the more empowering it is, and others will want to do the same.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
Not at all.
Let's just debrief your story a little bit. So starting with those words, a backup plan, and I'm sure everyone just cringes when they hear that because we've heard that a lot. And that, culturally, I feel like we're changing, but still mothers used to be in the home. And now, there's so many women that are career women and the pendulum has kind of swung the other way, but some people are still not quite on board. So what do you think? It's hard because their intention is probably good, but still, how could we maybe encourage other people to kind of loosen up on those beliefs? Do you have any advice?
That is a great question and something that I've thought about and wish that I had a great answer to. But I think one of the things that has most distilled in my mind is that a lot of these problems come from assumptions. And people just have assumptions about the way that they live their life and about the way that other people live their life. I have, I mentioned, like you mentioned in my bio, I'm studying psychology and plan to go into organizational behavior. And one really interesting study that I saw recently is that women have these possible selves. So we conceptualize like all the possibilities of what we can be and who we can be in the future. And you would think that these are limitless, right? Like the future has no bounds. But there is something actually that does limit women's possible selves that they can even ideate for the future. And one of those things is the amount of support they expect to have from a partner. And I would expect that that would extend to any social network, their families, anybody. So when there's all these assumptions that women are going to be a certain way, it really limits how women even can conceptualize themselves, and which I think is a tragedy. So I think anytime that we can challenge those assumptions, if somebody says, "Oh, like I don't know, that major will make you a great mom" or something, like I mentioned that I've had that before, I'd be like, "Oh, I think it will be like really great for my career," or just something that's not like confrontational or like rude, but people don't even realize they're making these assumptions sometimes.
Mm.
I think there's ways to correct that.
Yeah, that's so true. I talked about in another interview about gender disappointment because I have 3 boys and I always expected to have a girl. And so there's assumptions with that too. Oh, are you going to try for a girl? Or, oh, a boy and a girl, how perfect. They just reinforce these ideas or assumptions that a certain way is the way. But there's a lot of different possibilities. I like how you said that you would think that the possibilities are limitless, and they are as long as we put our mind to it or don't let other assumptions get in the way. So those were great tips. I love that. In your story, you mentioned a piece, just the words, you were looking for a place where you belonged. And that really hit me hard because I feel like all of us are looking for a place to belong. Do you feel like you've come to a place where you feel like you belong now that you've decided you can be more than just a mother?
That's a really good question too. These are all great. Um, hmm. I think that belonging has a lot to do with finding a calling. And I've been learning about how a calling has to be something that you feel you were born to do. You feel like circumstances in your life led you to that calling. And it's something that benefits the world, like it blesses people. And you feel a responsibility and a duty to do it. And for me, I really feel like I have found that in my career path. I have no idea what I'm going to actually end up doing in 10 years, but I know I have a goal right now, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I know that so many women find a calling in motherhood as well. And I think that the beauty is that there's so many callings that we can have in life. And someday, maybe I'm going to feel that calling towards motherhood. And maybe I'm not, but I know that God is so good that he's got so many plans for
Mm.
everybody. And I really feel like I've found one of them for me right now.
Oh, that's so good. My book came out a couple weeks ago, and it's called Let Yourself Bloom. It's a book about how we're a bouquet of flowers and not just one single flower. And I love that you said that too. We're not meant to just do one thing. There's a lot of different things and components that we have to ourselves that make us multidimensional. And the more we can step outside of just a singular role, the more we can fill that fulfillment or fill those callings. So that's really good.
Love that. Congrats on your book as well.
Thank you. And then would you say that the biggest moment of transformation in that story was when you met with that professor and you saw on the wall her pictures?
The pictures were an inciting, it was like, this is a safe space. This is a woman who may have been through what you've been through, and you can talk to her. Because I think something I've been afraid of and something that happens is that, like, when I was talking about assumptions, many of those assumptions came from other women. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if she's going to understand that, like, there's all these conflicting beliefs and ideas about who I am and what I want to be. And then I saw, there's these little signs that's like, oh, like, she's like really excelled in her career. Like, she's really proficient and she has a family. And obviously that isn't like the only person who is ever going to understand something like that. For me in that moment, I think the spirit directed me to see that. And I was like, okay, I can talk to her. But I think the real moment of transformation was really that line that she said when she said, there's as many ways to be a faithful woman as there are women in our church.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're a member of the church or not, I think it applies that there's as many ways to be a woman as there are women in the world. It's fantastic. I was like, oh, I can be me, and that's good enough. And that's so basic. Still, somehow it was a lesson I hadn't learned, and one that I took the first step towards learning in that moment.
That is profound. It's those simple truths that are the most profound. So thank you for sharing that. I love too how you said that she was a safe space. It can come from either side, because my friend in college, she was pregnant, and the professor had a meeting one-on-one with me and her at the same day but different times. And she said that my friend was planning to leave the career path and be a stay-at-home mom, and the professor was really just looking down on her and judging her for making that choice. And so again, she wouldn't have been a safe space, but women are experiencing this from both sides, whether they choose a career or whether they choose to be a stay-at-home mom. It's also personal, and it's all very dynamic and not black and white.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I shared this story, I actually put this together for a class that I took at BYU. And there was a group of my classmates and I got up and shared our stories. And the story, either right before or right after mine, was a girl who got up and talked about how she felt pressured into choosing a career and how she stepped away from her career to fulfill her dreams of motherhood. And I was like, this is so amazing that we have this space where we can just come together and share stories that are authentic, and like that's not a problem. And like, she sat down right next to me and we leaned over and fist bumped, and that was that. And I know the world's not always that simple and things are pretty complicated, but when we can have those spaces every now and then, when we can really just open up, I think that's super helpful.
That's so good. Beautiful. I love that you're into storytelling. It was a storytelling class, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have loved storytelling as well. I don't know if you've ever heard of Matthew Dix, but he's a fantastic storyteller, and he does moth grand slams and things like that. So I was inspired by him to have a storytelling night. So I've had a few storytelling nights since then. And my whole second season of my last podcast was about storytelling. Do you have any tips for storytellers, or what were some of your biggest takeaways that you learned from that class?
Oh, it's a good question. Hopefully my professors don't like listen to this and hear me butcher it. But one of the biggest helps was, okay, I'll share with you briefly the process they had us go through. And first they had us fill like 10 pages with just every memory that we could think of at all, ever. And 10 pages wasn't enough for that, but it was enough to like get some little snippets from my life in there. And from there, they're like, okay, look through and identify what's like a common need that you found through your life. And for me, I found the need of acceptance of who I was and what I wanted to do. And then they're like, okay, find some specific scenes that help with that. And there's a lot of different types of scenes, but one of the most important types that you need is a point of insight. And it doesn't have to be when this problem and this need was just totally resolved in your life. It could just be one step, but it needs to be like a discernible step that you took forward in finding and fulfilling this need. So for me, the peak one for that was when I met with that advisor. And then another one was when I saw the professor on my first day of school. And so you can find these little moments in your life and be like, oh, kind of trace your journey a little bit. And from there, you can put together a story of like beginning, middle, end, and just how things have unfolded for you to change and either find a new perspective on the need or fulfill the need or something. But an important part is they said, don't just tie up your story at the end with a little bow and make it all neat. The real truth about our stories is that if they're real and gritty and like genuine to us, they're not done. They're still going. And it's okay to say, hey, I figured this part out, but I'm still working on it. And just keep going from there. So I really liked that class.
Yeah, that's a fantastic roadmap to follow. So thank you for walking us through that.
Sure.
Is there anything else you wanted to share before we leave? This has been a great conversation.
You said a lot of your listeners are mothers. Okay. I just wanted to thank you all for all the hard work that you're doing. I'm not ready to be a mom yet, but I really have, like I said in my story, always looked up to the warmth and the faith and the strength of the mothers that I've seen. And I've seen them be so many different ways with so many different personalities, and all of them have been just perfect for the situation that they're in. And I hope that you feel that you're good enough, and I think you're awesome. So
That's so perfect. What a great way to end. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Jaycee.
thank you, Jen. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us on Let Yourself Bloom, where we embrace the beauty of balancing motherhood and ambition. I hope today's episode has inspired you to nurture your dreams while being the incredible mom that you are. Remember, it's not just about finding balance, it's about thriving in all aspects of your life. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with other amazing women. And if you're the kind of person who loves to watch podcasts, you can find this podcast on my YouTube channel at @LetYourselfBloom_ with Jenbanks, or on the Ride the Wave Media Podcast Network YouTube channel. Remember to stay connected with us on social media at @LetYourselfBloom_ with Jenbanks and join our community to keep blooming together. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep growing, and let yourself bloom.